Welcome, everyone. My name is Katie Bradford Osborne. I am the founder and curator of Roaring Artist Gallery. We are a fully virtual art gallery that represents exclusively women identifying artists. And we are here today with Keisha Lopez for her Ancestral Wisdom exhibition artist talk. And I'm so excited to hear what Keisha has to say. I'm going to do a quick little read through of Keisha's bio and artist statement. And then I'm going to hand it over to her and she's going to take it away. All right. Keisha Lopez is an artist living in Nashville, Tennessee. Her work explores themes of transformation, cultural ties, and duality by creating spaces shifting between landscapes, biomorphic imagery, and visions. She explores creativity as a mode of healing, growth, and neurogenesis. Keisha's latest body of work, Ancestral Wisdom, is a reintegration of her previously whitewashed cultural ties to Mesoamerica. This body of work radiates a divine femininity through color, weaving, and natural imagery. Specifically, the series looks back at how her lineage processed grief and death as a transformative state. Environmental connection takes the precedent in her work as it highlights the need for conservation and sustainability to create a more equitable future for all. Through a reconnection to her culture, Lopez pursues healing across generational trauma. All right, Keisha, I am going to hand it over to you, and I'm really excited to hear more about what you have going on with this series. All right.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I made a presentation kind of going back in my process as an artist. Let's see, I'm going to get that pulled up. All right, so I'm going to go back to 2015. So in order to speak about my journey that inspired me to create Ancestral Wisdom, I have to start there. I was a junior in college studying a BFA at MTSU. And during that time, I was diagnosed with an incurable leukemia. And so it changed the course of my life and it really stretched me emotionally. I was forced to face my own mortality as well as grieve the loss of my aunt, who was like my grounding figure in my life. She died of cancer as well. Let's see. So I'm going to show you a little bit about these. So this one's called Philadelphia chromosome 23. And on the left, it was needles submerged in encaustic. It's a heat process of an ancient wax medium. And on the right is the first lab report that told me I had cancer. And I made it into a paper pulp and I integrated it with a fresco. So I was like freezing that moment in time and that new realization of my life is not going to be exactly what I planned. So that was like me accepting my mortality and the chaos of my life to come. Next, I have this piece. It was almost a performative piece as well as a sculptural piece. So during that time, I had a lot of uncertainty about my future life, my future of fertility. And so this piece is called Barren. I actually took 26 eggs I took the yolk and like the life out of the egg and I substituted gauze representing the blood and leukemic cells in my body. And yeah, so only 4 of them were cast successfully. And it was a process of testing my patience as well as appreciating the thin line between life and death. This piece was a performative piece. So I took an oak stump from my backyard. It was about 75 pounds, and I spent about 3 weeks deconstructing it with just a hammer and a chisel. And afterwards, I balanced it on a single thread. So if this thread broke, I would start over. So it took about 8 hours to assemble. I have a short video here of me like doing that process. A lot of these pieces would fall to the ground or the whole thing would fall over and over again. And it was just my realization with one, testing my patience, viewing my practice as a meditative practice, as well as, you know, it's like what we leave in this world, not about, that's kind of the realization that I had. Let's see. All right, so for that year before that, I didn't touch color because it was my paint for me, and color for me is very intuitive, and it's very depictive of how I'm feeling. And so finally, like a year into that healing process, I picked up the palette again and my colors kind of exploded in a way. So this was my first piece that I was kind of tethered the line between soft sculpture and painting and weaving and falling into this style of working. And I called this one Half Truths and Everything in Between, because as a multicultural individual, I always felt people would be like, "What are you?" And I would say I identify as Latin, and then they'd be like, "Well, you're white passing," and I always felt very like ambiguous in my identity. So then I started kind of thinking about. So this piece was next. Some things cannot be whitewashed. I took a painting and then I cut it by hand into strips, and yeah, so I thought about like visually making it whitewash and what would be seeping through. And this was the last piece I made before I started my journey of ancestral wisdom. And if you have any questions about any of these, just feel free to put them in the chat and I'm happy to answer after this presentation. All right. This was actually at Stay Home Gallery. I was able to build a lot of these paintings and start them at least in 2020. I spent about a week there and it really like transformed the way I work. It was the first time I was able to work on have the amount of space and time to work. So let's see. So this one is called Probably Going to Eternalize This. Oops, excuse me. So it's probably going to internalize this. I created this at the peak of 2020. It was actually whenever I was watching all the hate speech around the border crisis. And, you know, I'm very privileged to be a citizen and now a first generation college graduate, but just seeing the images of the children and the mothers like being torn apart from their families, I started to internalize that hate speech, and it just shows all the angst and anxiety like pouring through. And this also was the second painting that started, if you notice, it's blue. I didn't exactly at this point know where this blue was coming from. It was very intuitive. And I signed up in my college into an ancient Mesoamerican course. I didn't exactly know I was Mayan when I signed up for this course because my history was kind of like suppressed. So they didn't really talk about it. They wanted me to, as a form of protection, to appear white. And so I signed up for this course with a feeling that this is where my family and my roots were tied. And so I'll go next here. And then this one's called A New Wave. This piece was finished within 2020, the day of the election. And it was a very intuitive process. And looking back now, I see to the right, there's this divine femininity pouring through, and it's very suggestive of the Mayan sculptures I see of like the overdone, like inflated like hips in the body and coming through, and also maybe the bloodletting ritual ceremonies, which was more about the giving of life and appreciating of women and their spirit. And this one's called Intuitive Wisdom. So this one, it was very challenging in the way I used polyfill and I used canvas, and I'm starting to move into soft sculpture even more in this piece. And also this shows a recurring theme of the weaving. So I see the weaving as not only just stemming from my culture, but also it is that act of meditation and repetition that kind of helped me get through. Like if you go back to Hanging on the Thread, it was all about repeating the same thing over and over. And this process is an act of meditation. And then it would help me like get into this flow state to where I can kind of see my paintings before they happened. And so this intuitive wisdom is all about like trusting your gut, and all of this like generations of voices and your ancestors telling you like to follow this. This is kind of what I feel when I'm going towards my creative pursuits. Also, I study psychology, and specifically there's this thing called epigenetics. And so there's evidence that trauma that someone feels can actually be passed down through generations through their DNA. So this means there could be long adverse side effects from something that you've never experienced, but maybe your grandmother or your great grandmother experienced. So it could take root as in someone seeing like, oh, my family struggles with depression. Oh, all the women in my family struggle with hysteria, or all those things. But really, it could be traumatic effects that have not been healed generationally that is passed down to you. So I see my art practice as kind of like trying to stop that cycle of trauma and heal myself, which isn't always a beautiful beautiful process. It's very hard. And so I see it as trying to like stop that that trauma being carried to the next generation. Like that's my life's work. This piece is Solar Synapse. And so when I was studying the Mayans and the culture, they would use this special pigment of blue. And it's actually the same blue that was pulling up through my paintings. And it represented water, and it tied them to, like, they would use water as ceremonies for life and as a transformative in their grieving process as well. Like they would, when they would place the bodies after they would bathe the bodies in water, and then they would drink of it as like a way to like process their grief as well. So the palette of Solar Synapse has like those Mesoamerican pigments. And then also, like, I see my paintings as creating space. So Mayans, all the temples they created, it was the idea that places held like sacred in value and weight. So I try to create depth in my paintings, whereas you see the geometry, it's like the shadow casting from the outside of those temples. So I see it as them tracking the sun and the constellations, the movement, and that shadow play is what the geometry stems from my work. And then, yeah, so this piece also has, I kind of like this in the way that it's traditional materials in such a non-traditional way. So like if I were to like say this is just acrylic on canvas, but the canvas has been reformed into something that new with just normal materials. So that's kind of why I really, really like the style working. And this piece is called On the Horizon. So I actually painted over this one, the white, over and over and over until it came to this painting. It's made of like recycled paintings. After a while, held onto this one. And On the Horizon for me, it's like the balance of hope and resilience right after or even during. Like you see on the bottom of the painting, you're going through all this like turmoil from like an inner level or even a societal level. And it's not very beautiful or pretty, but then towards the top of it, you always hold on faith into what's next, like the hope for the future. So some of these paints, it's very in person, it's very very impasto. So I left these paints on cardboard for about a week and a half, the oils, and it took all of the very loose viscous oil paint away, and it was very like very gritty. It was almost like butter that had been just like cold. So it was very fun for me to like experiment with this piece in that way. And this one is Meet Me at the Grand Canyon. So this was made about a year into my isolation. So as someone that has cancer, during the pandemic I couldn't leave my house until the vaccine. So I was isolated for almost 2 years, and this was about halfway through it I made this piece. And I was able through my art to kind of imagine where I wanted to go or the places that I've been very tied to. In the Grand Canyon, I've never been, but it's somewhere that I feel very led and tied to. So I was kind of picturing the sunrise or like the mountains and the interplay of that. So it's almost like a psychological imagining of that landscape. And this piece is From Elder to Ancestor. So in the Izapa tradition, there are stelas that depict this moment. For them, it's the moment of death that an elder that was part of their lives is transformed into an ancestor. So I pay homage to that moment, to the moment I've had to grieve my aunt or my other people that have been very important to me that passed my life. So I see it as like a transformative process. The white marks can even be seeds falling from the plant or water like enabling it to live. So it's a duality of that experience. And so in ancient Mesoamericans, the stelas, they would see these plants and then put their like say this was my grandfather and like show the lineage through plants. And so this was almost me using my plants as understanding that yes, they're gone, but their seeds are still going to multiply forward through me or through you. Also, the blue is derived. I'm going to talk more about this specific place in my culture. It's called the Lagoon of the Crescent Moon. So the blue is, this painting is supposed to be happening underwater because I'll reveal more about that in the next. But yeah, I'm going to go back to the next one. And this is that painting as well. Like this is, I'm actually going to go this way. So this is the Lagoon of the Crescent Moon. I'm going to tell you about this story. So I was going into the ancient Mesoamerican course and I was like, I wonder if, you know, the San Luis Potosi where my family was for 15 generations before history, I was like, I wonder if I'll learn about it. And I was like going through this course, like wondering if it was going to come. And then finally it came to this place. And it was called the Lagoon of the Crescent Moon. And it was where the shamans would do rituals after deaths of their family members. And they would do a psychedelic ceremony over the water to kind of intercede that middle ground between life and death and ask them about their hopes for the future, or, you know, ask them what they should be doing in their lives. And I see it as a place to where I can see my aunt or like talk to people that have gone and put my sorrow, but also pick up their hope. So that piece would be what the shamans would be seeing in that psychedelic ritual, whereas this piece would be from the ancestors underneath the water, sending up the light and the seeds and the answers to the individual seeking to speak to them. So I call this piece magical thinking. So this would be a very long ago transformed ancestor. So someone that, say, it would be like 16 generations ago. So below the surface is a gateway of harnessing your creative pathway for healing, not only on a singular level, but on a community level. So the abstractive flora in this piece depict a sacred place of solace and inspiration. So I see the silver as like seeds of wisdom passed down intuitively through generations. And I'm going to show you a video of this here so you can kind of see it, how it would be in person. And actually, if you remember the first piece I did of the nails and the needles, it was crazy. It was almost like 5 years had gone past since I made that piece. And immediately when I finished that one, I saw this one in juxtaposition to show like my growth as an individual and my healing journey. And then this is another one as well. I have 6 of these. If you would love to go see the show, you could see the rest of these. I did them in a series. They're covered with resin as well, so they're very glossy. So you're supposed to feel like you're standing over that portal of water as well. And then this can show you some of the scale of those pieces. I'm gonna open the line if anyone has any questions or. Yeah.
Love this video. We have a couple of really great questions from Erica. I'll read them out for you. What was the most difficult part for you in Barren? Could be technically, emotionally, whatever comes up for you.
So in that piece, one, it was like an idea. Like I think I was driving when I had this idea and I didn't know how to execute it. I just knew what the result I had. So it was being patient, like keeping going and persevering. That's kind of what I learned from that, because the eggs would just crack over and over and over. And I could kind of describe how I actually did it. I had to cut I had to use a needle to do a pinhole and use air to suction the yolk out, like a breath work. And then I had to take apart a Q-tip to put wax on the end and delicately put it around the egg so it act as a release. So it was very much trial and error, very, very much like just trying to learn to make it happen. Yeah. And then another question.
Yeah, that's, oh, I wish I had that kind of patience.
Yeah, I was like, I need to be a more patient individual. Like no answer worthwhile in my life is going to come to me from not working towards it. That's kind of what I learned.
I think that's a really beautiful concept of taking that and putting it into your art. I think that's really beautiful. Okay, her second question is, did you intentionally choose the colors and some things can't be whitewashed? If so, could you share what those colors are and why?
Um, so I did. To me, it was on a big piece of canvas, and the colors for me were supposed to be like thermal energy almost. And on top, the whitewash, it was gestures of the female form with just charcoal, and then I extracted it and cut it out. So it was just kind of like disjointed.
Awesome. One question I have, you use very specific colors in all of your work. I think the Lagoon of the Crescent Moon series has a couple of other colors, but that makes sense for what you're doing with that. But in general, your pieces have very, very specific colors. Have you found, other than the blue, have you found other, and I know you choose them intuitively. So have you found other underlying reasons or things that these colors are standing for you?
Actually, I studied in my course the pigment of Mesoamerica, and that yellow, and not that bright yellow, but that more of an ochre natural yellow, and then like a deep dark red, as well as the like brown, those were actually used in the stela as well. So it's something, it's like as when I'm painting, it's a form of like meditation and like a flow, and I'm not sure where the colors are coming from. I like to see it as my ancestors speaking through me, like I'm just a mouthpiece.
I love that. I really love how you've allowed yourself to be a mouthpiece in this way in really exploring. This is exploration, right? This is exploration into your past, into your ancestry. And I think it has come out in such a beautiful, fascinating way. A lot of things I certainly, whenever we first started talking about the show, did not expect. And that's been really exciting to see. A lot of the work in the show, I can feel how it sort of works together in a story, but a lot of it's very different. What is your favorite parts of this particular body of work?
Definitely the Lagoon of the Crescent Moon, because it's somewhere I definitely want to travel like as soon as I can. And the fact that I actually did a ancestry DNA test while I was doing the series, and I had never done one before. And on it, my family was pinpointed from that exact location for before history, like they countless generations. So it felt very powerful, and like I felt very tied to it. And even just like it helped me in my grieving of like missing my aunt and seeing it as like she's still a part of me and could be there as well. So, and also like all of the plant paintings I did, I've actually grown those plants and they're like in my house. So I have a special like place for those, because I try to reconnect to that tropical place even though I'm not living there, by having the plants surround me. So
I love that. We have another question. Do you have a process you engage with to get into that intuitive space? How do you open up that flow?
so it's been different for different stages of my life. So definitely in 2015, it was just the act of showing up and trying to not think of anything at all and just trying to like get to work. Nowadays, I try, like I have this habit of I have to like disconnect and like not have my phone or anything around me, and usually takes like long sessions. So it takes about 3 or 4 hours of painting, but during that time, like the time just falls away. Really, it's just you have to be in the studio, and even when it's not working at first, trust that it's gonna come. So I guess just like keeping your hands moving and really, really also like surrounding yourself with people that when you are stuck, you can talk to them and they can help lift you up and encourage you and help push you through as well. So your sense of community helps as well.
That is an excellent answer. I love that. Do we have any other specific questions for Keisha? And Keisha, do you have anything else that you wanted to share in particular?
Only that, like, in my journey of healing, like now my goal is to go to grad school for a therapy degree, and I want to help others learn how to heal through art therapy. So that's my definitely long-term goal. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to that too. I'm excited about what you'll do in the future. Erica asked, could you elaborate on the stela?
I will definitely have to text that one to you because my notes are all written down like scribbles about that. But I can find that exact stela and I will text that to you, or I'll post it in my Instagram stories today. Yeah.
That would be awesome. If you'll send me that info too, I want to put it with the YouTube video. I think that'll be really cool. All right.
I appreciate everyone for coming. I see a lot of familiar friends and faces, so I appreciate you all always supporting my work.
Yes, this has been great. Thank you so much, Keisha, for sharing. We've got a couple of thank you, Keishas. Thank you for sharing your practice with us. Powerful work, absolutely. I could not agree more. All right. Well, thank you so much, Keisha, for sharing this with us. This is a beautiful series on so many levels. It's beautiful aesthetically, but it's also just, I think, the journey that you're taking us on with you with this series is really exciting, and it is very touching, but it's really beautiful. And I think that this is something certainly very timely, but I really, really love that you're sharing this with us. And I love that we got to show it in the gallery. So thank you for allowing us to do that. Okay, do you feel that the work you're making is creating healing for your ancestors and for those around you? You mentioned epigenetics.
Yes. So I have a really good friend who is a therapist, and we discuss this all the time about sometimes I'll have dreams that are very much connected to my work and processing of my trauma. And I actually had one last night right before I did this. Yes, so I feel as I'm like uncovering my identity and heritage and like unlearning like implicit biases and all these things that I was taught, like being raised in the South, I definitely feel like I'm becoming who they wanted me to be or who they would have hoped I would be. So yes, it's definitely been it's healing's very hard. Like I've been in therapy while doing this process. So, but yes, I definitely feel like it's going to be like an ongoing process my whole life, but it feels like I'm going the right direction for sure with this work.
I appreciate that you mentioned therapy in particular. I know I've had a couple of artists who have spoken to me in the past. Artists, obviously, as a whole, were kind of known as having some issues with our mental health and things like that in different ways. Quite a few of us, most artists that I know, I think it's a lifestyle that definitely you're constantly delving into your own psyche in a way.
Yes,
But I've had some artists who have told me in the past that they were almost scared to get help and to get therapy and things like that because of how it would affect their art. I think it's really beautiful the way that you are incorporating that experience into your art, that experience of healing into your art. I think that's really beautiful. So I'm really glad that you hit on that.
so that archetype that I used to believe that, and I used to have collectors tell me that I should just be some some Jackson Pollock that just drinks and disregards my complete mental health. I also don't speak to those collectors anymore, and
I'm
I
glad to hear that. Yes.
want to like hash down that archetype of the artist that is emotionally like unstable, because actually, like, I've learned now that I'm healed, my work has gotten better, stronger, and I can make more work now. And if you go back to like even Frida Kahlo and other artists that struggled with mental health, bodily health, their most poignant and strongest periods were actually when they um, had help and care to their mental health. So I I feel like that's a harsh archetype that a lot of people like have to break down.
I'm glad you are. I think that's really important work within our artist community. Okay, let's see here. Andre said, it's beautiful that you are aware of your ancestry now and healing generational trauma. How can other artists tap into that intentional healing process? And how can those who don't consider themselves artists tap into that healing process?
So I think for me, doing a lot of research about your roots. So whether that be from like an academic, from like journals, or like archaeology, like studying, that's the route I kind of went. Um, Talking to your aunts or your cousins, or even just like people that have the same heritage as you, and just like listening. And um, Andres, like I think what he is doing is like healing the immigrant community in Tennessee, like through activism. That definitely helps as well.
That's wonderful. Erica said that's a harmful archetype. I think we were still talking about the mental illness archetype of the happen to keep it. I think, yeah.
That misconception's like rampant. Like
It really is. I still hear it with even with artists who, I mean, I speak to a lot of artists on a regular basis. Um, it's amazing how often it comes up. And I think, I mean, I know myself in particular, I have my entire list, and I would not be where I am without antidepressants and therapy and things like that. And it is such a harmful archetype. And I really love that you're attacking that head on. I think that's a really great thing.
thank you.
Especially doing such intuitive and in-depth work as you are doing.
Yeah, because I was worried about that at first too. Because I was like, it's so intuitive. It's tied by my emotions. But like I said, now that I'm feeling like the most centered as I've ever felt in my life, my work can now like almost like cut through the static of all those fears that I used to have. So
That's awesome. I think people who very successfully do work like this have that emotional side as well as that analytical side. And it's the coming together of those two things that produce work like, especially like what we're looking at in front of us with the Lagoon of the Crescent Moon. I think that that's a really good example of that.
yeah,
Well,
thank
do
you.
we
I actually started when I was in school. I wanted to be a portrait artist, and I was like all about realism. And then I had like just a break when I saw Robert Mehta's "The Earth Is a Man." It's I saw that piece, and I just like felt so moved by abstraction that I was like, it cut away my fears of not being a true artist, and as and so like I dove into abstraction. So
That's awesome. Well, do we have any more questions for Keisha? Well, Keisha, thank you again one more time for coming and sharing this beautiful, poignant, deep group of work with us. I think this is a very vulnerable place, putting yourself on the wall in this way. And I want you to know that I really appreciate that you've allowed us to show it in the gallery and that you have come and spoke for this artist talk. I think that that's a really brave thing and a really beautiful thing.
thank you for giving me a platform. I really appreciate you.
Andres asks, what projects do you have upcoming for empowering community healing projects?
Actually, I'm helping. I'm working with Andres, and we're working on a Metro Arts Thrive grant, and we're gonna try to bring art healing workshops to marginalized communities. So whether that be children, youth, or adults. And I want to help them be able to find a form of resilience through art. So whether they need that art that is about repetition and disassociation, or they need that art that's about diving deeper and like tying onto their cultural heritage, I want to help give people the tools and in an accessible way to begin that journey.
That's really awesome. I'm very excited to see what comes next for you, Keisha. I think you're tapping into something really special here. And I think that that's just going to continue. Andres, it's so excited. I am too. All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I'm not going to hold you all day, Keisha, but thank you again. Thank you to everyone who has come and supported Keisha and supported the gallery today. And thank you to everyone who will be viewing this on YouTube. It'll be up in a few days and it'll be available for anyone who has missed it or who wants to go back and see it. I know that I really love to be able to go back to see the shows again after these artist talks. If you are viewing this before the 15th of November of 2021, then this entire show is still going to be up in our 3D virtual space at roaringartistgallery.com. So make sure that you go and view it. If you're seeing this after November 15th, 2021, then a few days after, there should be a show that'll come up just sort of set to elevator music, and you can watch a tour of the virtual exhibition. That's one of the cool things about doing everything virtually, that we can share that still after the fact. But thank you again, Keisha. Thank you for everyone who's come and who will see the show. And be sure to reach out to Keisha. She's left her Instagram here at Keisha Lopez Studio. Follow along with her. I know we're all excited to see what you do next, Keisha.
Thank you so much.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Bye.